In small towns, the sheriff is supposed to be the last line of defense, the familiar face, the trusted voice, the one person everyone knows. But what happens when the badge doesn't mean safety? And the law is the reason people stop asking questions. Tonight on Dark Hours, we're uncovering 5 small-town sheriff horror stories. True accounts where authority turned unsettling and help came wearing the wrong uniform. If you're new here, subscribe to Dark Hours for true horror and disturbing real stories best told after dark. And tell me in the comments, are you watching from a small town or a big city tonight? Now dim the lights, and let's begin. My name is Sheriff Jake Moreno, and I picked up something on Highway 49 that I can't put down. It's been in my car for 6 days now, and I'm running out of places to drive. It happened last Tuesday night around 11 p.m. I was heading back to Copper Ridge after a domestic call in the next county. Nothing serious, couple arguing too loud, neighbor concerned. I diffused it, filed the report, was looking forward to a beer in bed. Highway 49 cuts through 40 miles of absolute nothing, scrubland and darkness. No lights except stars and the occasional set of headlights going the opposite direction. I'd driven it 1,000 times. Could do it half asleep. That's when I saw her on the shoulder. A woman, young, wearing a sundress, completely wrong for the desert night. She was just standing there, not waving, not moving, just existing in my headlights. I slowed, pulled over. Protocol says you don't pick up hitchhikers, but protocol also says you don't leave people stranded in the dark where rattlesnakes and exposure can kill. I approached cautiously. She didn't turn toward me, just stared out at the darkness beyond the road. "Miss? You okay? You need help?" When she finally looked at me, her eyes caught the light wrong, reflective like an animal's, but that had to be a trick of the angle. "I need a ride," she said. Her voice was soft, almost musical. "I need to keep moving." "Where you headed?" "Away." She smiled, and her teeth seemed too white, too many. Another trick of the light had to be. "Just away, please, I can't stop moving." Every instinct I had screamed to get back in the car, alone, and drive off. But I was a sheriff, and she was a person in need, and I'd sworn an oath. I opened the back door. "Get in, I'll take you to Copper Ridge, get you sorted out." She slid into the back seat with a movement that was too fluid, boneless almost. When I got back behind the wheel, I adjusted the rearview mirror to keep an eye on her. She wasn't there. I mean, she was. I could hear her breathing, could see the seat depressed where she sat, but the mirror showed an empty back seat. I blinked, adjusted the mirror again. Nothing, just the upholstery. "What's your name?" I asked, pulling back onto the highway. My voice was steadier than I felt. "I don't remember," she said from the invisible space behind me. "It's been too long. How long have you been driving?" "Just heading home now, 20-minute drive." "No," she said. "How long have you been driving?" I didn't understand the question, so I didn't answer. I focused on the road, on the white lines scrolling past, on getting to Copper Ridge where I could hand this off to someone else, anyone else. But Copper Ridge didn't come. I drove for 20 minutes, then 30, then an hour. The road stretched on, identical scrubland on both sides, stars overhead, no landmarks, no turnoffs. My gas gauge hadn't moved. The odometer wasn't changing, and in the back seat, the thing that looked like a woman started humming. "Where are we?" I finally asked, my hands aching from gripping the wheel. "Nowhere yet," she said. "Everywhere still. I told you, I need to keep moving, and now you're moving with me. Thank you for stopping, Sheriff. Most people don't anymore. They've learned." I tried to pull over. The car wouldn't slow. My foot pressed the brake to the floor, but we maintained exactly 60 miles per hour, cruising through eternal darkness. "What are you?" My voice cracked. "I'm the reason you should never stop," she said. "I'm the passenger you can't let out. I'm the ride that doesn't end." I tried opening my door, locked, jammed, fused. The windows wouldn't roll down. The radio produced only static, and underneath the static, that humming, her humming, growing louder. Hour 3, I started seeing other cars, not on the road, beside it, half buried in sand, decades old, 50s sedans and 70s coupes, 80s hatchbacks and 90s trucks. All empty, all with their engines still running, headlights burning despite no visible power source. "Other drivers who stopped," she said, following my gaze. "Other kind people. They're still moving too, in their own ways. You all keep me going. You all feed the road." Hour 6, the sun should have risen. It didn't. The darkness continued. absolute and unchanging. I was exhausted but couldn't sleep. Every time I blinked, I saw more abandoned cars, more evidence of other sheriffs, other good Samaritans who'd made my mistake. Hour 12, I stopped being able to feel my legs. They moved when I thought about moving them, but the sensation was distant, like controlling a puppet. I was merging with the seat, with the car, becoming part of the machine that carried her. Hour 18. I couldn't remember my wife's name. I knew I had a wife. There was a ring on my finger, a photograph on the dashboard. But the details were being siphoned away, fuel for the endless drive. Day 2, I forgot what Copper Ridge looked like. Day 3, I forgot where I'd been going. Day 4, I forgot why I was a sheriff, what that meant, what anything meant except the road and the wheel and the thing in the back seat that hummed and hummed and hummed. She talks sometimes, tells me about the others, about the traveling salesman in 1952 who picked her up outside Tucson and drove until his car ran out of oil and his heart ran out of beats, but kept driving anyway for 3 more years. About the family in 1978 who stopped to help, all 4 of them, and who are still out here somewhere, circling the same stretch of highway in their station wagon. The children never aging, the parents never dying, just driving forever because they were kind. The road needs travelers, she explains. The darkness needs movement. Every car's a vein, and we're the blood keeping the night alive. You should be grateful, Sheriff. You'll never have to stop now. You'll never have to arrive anywhere. You'll just be forever moving. Day 6 is now, I think. It's hard to track time when nothing changes. I don't need to eat anymore. Don't need to sleep. The gas tank is perpetually at half full. The engine never overheats. My body is numb from the waist down and going numb higher. But I can still think. That's the cruelty of it. I'm aware of what's happening, aware that I'm becoming one of those abandoned cars I passed, still conscious when I'm just a shell with an engine and a passenger who'll never leave. Sometimes I see other drivers. They pass in the opposite direction, or parallel to me on roads that shouldn't exist. I can see their faces, the terror, the confusion, the slow resignation. Once I saw a highway patrol car. The officer inside mouthing words I couldn't hear, and in his back seat, a woman in a sundress smiling. There are so many of us out here. A whole highway full of the kind-hearted and the foolish, driving nowhere forever, keeping something ancient and hungry fed with our movement, our memory, our slowly dissolving selves. The thing in my back seat is humming again. I catch glimpses of her sometimes in the passenger window's reflection. She's changing, becoming less human, more something else, more what she always was beneath the disguise. My name is Sheriff Jake Moreno, and I need you to understand something. If you're driving at night and you see someone on the shoulder, someone who shouldn't be there, someone who needs a ride, don't stop, don't even slow down, because the road is always hungry, and the passenger is always waiting, and once you let her in, you'll never let her out. You'll just drive and drive and drive until you forget there was ever anything else, until you are the road, are the darkness, are the warning that no one will heed. I can't feel my chest anymore. My breathing is automatic, unnecessary. Soon I won't need it at all. Soon I'll just be the car, carrying her to the next kind person, the next fool who stops. Don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. The road goes on forever. And so will I. And so will you if you're not careful. There's a photograph on my phone that I can't delete, and believe me, I've tried. I've tried hundreds of times, but every time I think it's gone, it reappears in my camera roll, like it's mocking me, like it wants me to remember what I saw that summer. My name is David Torres, and I used to be a substitute teacher in Ashwood Falls, a town of maybe 1,200 people tucked into the mountains of West Virginia where the fog rolls in thick every evening and doesn't burn off until noon the next day. Where the trees grow so close together that hiking trails turn to tunnels of green, where children sometimes wandered into the woods and came back different in ways their parents couldn't quite articulate, but everyone could sense. I was 24 years old that summer, fresh out of college with an education degree I didn't know what to do with, so when my aunt called and said the elementary school in Ashwood Falls needed a long-term substitute for a teacher who'd gone on unexpected medical leave, I jumped at the opportunity. I needed the money and I needed the experience, and I thought teaching in a small town would be easy, peaceful, simple. I was wrong about all of that. I arrived in late August, when the summer heat still clung to everything and the mountains seemed to press in from all sides, and I met Principal Hayes, who was a thin, nervous woman in her 50s who shook my hand too hard and told me I'd be teaching the 4th grade class, 22 students, good kids mostly. though there had been some behavioral issues with a few of them, and I should be patient and understanding because they'd been through trauma. "What kind of trauma?" I asked, and Principal Hayes' expression went very still, and she said that several of the children had gotten lost in the woods during a school field trip back in May, that they'd been missing for 3 days before search parties found them, and ever since then they'd been different, quieter, more withdrawn, and their parents were concerned. But the therapist said it was normal after such a frightening experience, and they just needed time and stability. She didn't meet my eyes when she said this. She looked at a spot just over my left shoulder like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. And I felt uneasy, but I nodded and said I understood, and I'd do my best to help the kids feel safe. The first week of school was normal enough. The children came in every morning with their backpacks and lunch boxes, sat in their assigned seats, participated in lessons, played at recess. But I noticed certain things that bothered me in ways I couldn't quite explain. 6 of the kids, Emma, Caleb, Sophie, James, Lily, and Noah, were the ones who'd gotten lost in the woods, and they sat together in a cluster at the back of the room, even though my seating chart had them spread out. They'd moved themselves that first day, and when I tried to make them go to their assigned seats, they all looked at me with these identical blank expressions, and Emma said in this flat voice that they needed to stay together, and something about the way she said it made me decide not to push the issue. Those 6 children never played with the other kids at recess. They stood in a tight circle near the fence line, perfectly still, not talking, just standing there facing each other for the entire 20 minutes. They ate lunch the same way, sitting at their own table, their food largely untouched, just staring at each other in silence. And they never blinked. I know how insane that sounds, but I started paying attention, and I swear to God, those 6 children went entire class periods without blinking once, their eyes fixed and unmoving like glass eyes, like doll eyes, and whenever I looked at them directly, I felt this crawling sensation on the back of my neck, like something was watching me from behind their faces. The other students seemed afraid of them. I noticed that nobody wanted to sit near the group of 6, that kids would go out of their way to avoid brushing against them in the hallway, that conversations would stop abruptly when one of the 6 entered a room. I asked some of the other teachers about it during lunch one day, tried to be casual about it, mentioned that Emma and her friends seemed really affected by their experience in the woods. The other teachers exchanged these loaded glances, and Mrs. Patterson, who'd been teaching first grade for 30 years, leaned in close and whispered that I should be careful around those children, that there was something not right about them since they came back, that parents had been calling the school asking for their kids to be moved to different classes, but Principal Hayes refused because she said segregating them would make the situation worse. "What situation?" I asked, and Mrs. Patterson just shook her head and said I'd understand soon enough, that Ashwood Falls had always had problems with the woods, that children disappeared into them regularly over the decades, and usually they never came back, but sometimes they did, and when they did, they weren't the same. They were changed in fundamental ways that nobody wanted to discuss, because discussing it meant acknowledging that something lived in those woods, something old and wrong that took children and sent back copies, empty vessels that looked right but felt wrong in every way that mattered. I thought she was being dramatic, exaggerating small-town superstition into something bigger and scarier than it was. I thought that, until the incident with the drawing. It was a Wednesday in late September. I'd assigned the class a creative writing exercise where they had to draw a picture of their favorite place and then write a paragraph describing it. Most of the kids drew their homes, or the park, or the ice cream shop in town, but the 6 children who'd been lost in the woods, they all drew the same thing, exactly the same thing. I went around the room collecting the drawings, and when I got to their cluster in the back, I saw that Emma, Caleb, Sophie, James, Lily, and Noah had each produced identical pictures, a circle of trees with a dark opening in the center, and inside that opening a figure that was vaguely humanoid, but wrong. Too tall, with too many joints in its limbs, with a head that was the wrong shape, with eyes that were just black circles taking up most of its face. I stared at these 6 identical drawings and felt my mouth go dry. The children looked up at me with those unblinking eyes, and Emma said in that flat, affectless voice, "That's where we went. That's who we met. That's who sent us back." And all 6 of them smiled simultaneously, and their smiles were wrong, too wide, showing too many teeth. Not the smile of children, but the smile of something imitating children, something that had studied human expressions, but didn't quite understand them. I took the drawings to Principal Hayes' office immediately. I spread them out on her desk and demanded to know what was really going on, why these children were all drawing the same disturbing image, what had actually happened to them in the woods. Principal Hayes looked at the drawings and her face went so pale I thought she might pass out. She swept them into her desk drawer and locked it, and then she grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt and told me in this urgent whisper that I needed to stop asking questions, that I needed to teach my class and go home every day and not think too hard about certain things, that Ashwood Falls had survived for over 200 years, by understanding that some mysteries were better left alone. But I couldn't leave it alone. That night I did research on the town's history, scrolling through old newspaper archives online, and I found dozens of stories about children disappearing into the woods around Ashwood Falls. Some dated back to the 1800s. Most of the children were never found, declared lost to the wilderness. But occasionally there were stories about miraculous returns, children stumbling out of the forest after days or weeks, unharmed, unable to explain where they'd been or what had happened. I found one article from 1987 about a group of 5 children who'd gotten lost during a camping trip and were found 3 days later sitting in a perfect circle in a clearing, holding hands, completely silent. The article mentioned that the children had trouble readjusting to normal life afterward, that they seemed distant and changed. But it attributed this to trauma and didn't elaborate further. I started paying closer attention to the 6 children in my class. I watched them during lessons and noticed that they never took notes, never looked at their textbooks, but somehow they knew all the answers when I called on them. Answered in perfect unison sometimes, which should have been impossible, which meant they were somehow connected, somehow sharing thoughts or information in a way that violated everything I understood about how human minds worked. I watched them at lunch and saw that while they pushed food around their trays, they never actually ate anything, never swallowed, and once I saw Sophie open her mouth and a piece of sandwich fell out like she'd forgotten she was supposed to chew and swallow it rather than just hold it in her mouth. The worst thing was the way they looked at me. Those 6 pairs of eyes tracked my every movement with an intensity that felt predatory, felt hungry, and I started having nightmares about those eyes following me, about waking up and finding all 6 children standing around my bed just watching me with those unblinking stares. The nightmares got bad enough that I started sleeping with the lights on, and I knew I was losing it. Knew I was letting fear and paranoia consume me, but I couldn't stop because I could feel something building, some tension increasing like pressure before a storm, and I knew something terrible was going to happen. It happened on a Friday in early October. We were doing art class, painting fall scenes, and I was walking around the room offering help and encouragement when I noticed that the 6 children weren't painting trees or pumpkins like everyone else. They were all painting that same dark opening in the forest, that same wrong figure with too many joints and too many eyes. But this time there was something new in their paintings. There were smaller figures around the large one, child-sized figures. Maybe 20 or 30 of them, all standing in a circle, all facing inward toward the central figure, and I realized with a horror that made me dizzy that these were all the children who disappeared over the decades, that they were still in the woods somehow, still with that thing, and the 6 in my classroom were just extensions of it, remote viewing devices or puppets or something I didn't have words for. I must have made some sound because all 6 of them turned to look at me at exactly the same moment, their heads swiveling with mechanical precision, and Emma stood up and said, "Mr. Torres, would you like to come to the woods with us? Would you like to meet the one who waits? He's very interested in you. He's been watching through our eyes and he thinks you'd make a good addition to the circle." The other 16 children in the classroom went absolutely silent. The air felt thick, hard to breathe, and I could see my breath fogging even though it was warm in the room. The 6 children started walking toward me in perfect synchronization, their movements identical, their faces expressionless, and I backed away until I hit the wall and couldn't go any further. They stopped about 3 feet from me, standing in a line, and together they said, "Come with us, come with us, come with us," in this terrible chorus, their voices overlapping and echoing in a way that shouldn't have been possible in that small classroom. I pushed past them and ran out of the classroom, down the hallway, out the front doors of the school, and I kept running until I reached my car in the parking lot. I sat there shaking, watching the school entrance. And after about 5 minutes, Principal Hayes came out and walked slowly to my car and tapped on the window. I lowered it, and she said very quietly, "You need to leave Ashwood Falls, Mr. Torres. Tonight. Pack your things and go and don't come back. This town isn't safe for people who ask questions and you've asked too many." I asked her what those children were, what had happened to them, and she closed her eyes for a long moment, and when she opened them, they were wet with tears, and she said, "They're still in the woods, the real children. They never came back. What we have now are empty things wearing their shapes, sent out as lures to bring more children into the forest, to expand the circle. It's been happening for generations. We can't stop it. We can only try to live with it and warn people like you who don't understand that some places are hungry and some things are patient, and Ashwood Falls belongs to the woods, has always belonged to the woods." I left that night, threw everything I owned into my car and drove out of town, and I haven't been back. But I can't escape what I saw because of that photograph on my phone, the one I took of those 6 paintings before I ran, the one that shows the clearing and the figure and all those small shapes standing in a circle. I've tried to delete it 1,000 times, but it always comes back, and sometimes when I look at it late at night, the small figures in the circle seem to have moved, seem to be facing different directions, and I swear sometimes there are more of them than there were before, like the circle is growing, like the thing in the woods is still collecting children, still expanding its domain. I reported everything to the police in the neighboring county, tried to get someone to investigate, but they looked at me like I was insane and suggested I get some rest and maybe talk to a therapist. Nobody wants to believe that an entire town could be complicit in something so horrible, that parents could know their children were replaced by something else and just accept it because the alternative is worse. Because fighting back means acknowledging what's in the woods and maybe drawing its attention more fully. I've thought about going back, about trying to do something, about trying to save those children if they're still somehow alive in that forest. But I'm too afraid, and I hate myself for being afraid. But that fear keeps me alive, keeps me far away from Ashwood Falls and the mountains and the woods that hunger. Sometimes I wonder how many towns like Ashwood Falls exist, how many small isolated places have made deals with things that live in the wilderness, how many children go missing every year and are written off as runaways or accidents when the truth is so much worse. I wonder if that's why small towns feel strange sometimes, why certain places have that atmosphere of unspoken dread, why locals warn outsiders about going certain places or doing certain things, because they know, they've always known, that they live next to something ancient and evil, and the only way to survive is to feed it occasionally and not ask questions about the children who come back wrong. The photograph is still on my phone and it's on my computer now too, backed up to the cloud without me doing it, and I think whatever took those children wants me to remember, wants me to know that it's still out there, still waiting, still collecting, and maybe one day I'll look at that photograph and I'll see myself in the circle, a new small figure standing with all the others, and I'll know that the thing in the woods has finally decided to add me to its collection, and there won't be anything I can do to stop it because you can't fight something that exists outside the rules, something that's been feeding on children for centuries while entire towns watch and say nothing because silence is the price of survival. They told me the house had been empty for 30 years when I bought it, which should have been my first warning sign, but I was desperate and broke, and the price was so low it felt like winning the lottery. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I moved to Harrow's End in the spring of 2019 because I'd just gone through a divorce that left me with almost nothing, because I needed to start over somewhere nobody knew me, because I saw the listing for a 3-bedroom Victorian on 2 acres for less than the cost of a used car, and I thought I'd found a miracle. Harrow's End was one of those dying small towns in upstate New York, where the main street had more empty storefronts than open businesses, where the population had dropped from 5,000 to barely 800, where everyone was either very old or very young because anyone with ambition had left decades ago. It seemed perfect for someone who wanted to disappear for a while, who wanted to be alone with their thoughts and figure out how to rebuild a life that had collapsed. I should have wondered why a house that big and that beautiful was so cheap. I should have asked more questions, but I was tired and desperate, and when I signed the papers and got the keys, all I felt was relief. The house was at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by overgrown gardens and forest that pressed in close on all sides. It was beautiful in a decaying sort of way. Tall windows with intricate woodwork, a wraparound porch with carved railings, a turret on the east side that gave the whole thing a fairy tale quality. The real estate agent, a nervous woman named Carol, handed me the keys and said I should call her if I needed anything at all. And then she drove away so fast her tires kicked up a cloud of dust that took minutes to settle. I stood on the porch with my 2 suitcases and looked at this house that was now mine, and I felt something I couldn't quite identify. something that was part excitement and part dread, like I'd just made a terrible mistake, but it was too late to take it back. The inside was dusty and filled with furniture covered in white sheets, like someone had left in a hurry planning to come back but never did. I walked through the rooms, pulling sheets off couches and chairs and tables, revealing furniture from the 1970s or earlier, old but well made, the kind of stuff that would last forever. The house had good bones, as my mother would have said. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, big windows that let in lots of light. But it also had this smell, this faint odor like damp earth and old flowers. And no matter how many windows I opened or how much I aired the place out, that smell never quite went away. I told myself it was just because the house had been closed up for so long that it would fade once I'd been living there for a while. I was wrong about that too. The first night I spent in that house, I didn't sleep. I lay in the master bedroom on an air mattress I'd brought with me, listening to the house settle around me. And houses do make noises when they settle, I know that. Everyone knows that. But these noises were different. These noises sounded organic, rhythmic, like breathing. Like the house was inhaling and exhaling, its walls expanding and contracting just slightly, just enough to make the floorboards creak and the windows rattle in their frames. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was stressed and exhausted and my mind was playing tricks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was alive somehow, that it was aware of me, that it was adjusting to my presence the way a body adjusts to a foreign object. I met some of the neighbors over the next few days. Old Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down brought me a casserole and told me welcome to the neighborhood in this sad voice, like she was offering condolences rather than greetings. The Harrises who lived across the road stopped by with a basket of muffins and asked me how I was settling in, and when I said fine, great actually, the house was wonderful, they exchanged this look that made my stomach clench. Mr. Harris cleared his throat and said I should know that the previous owners, the Blackwood family, they'd left very suddenly back in 1989, just packed up in the middle of the night and disappeared, and nobody had lived in the house since because people said it was cursed, said bad things happened there, said the Blackwoods had experienced some kind of tragedy, though nobody seemed to know exactly what. I laughed it off. I told them I didn't believe in curses, that the house seemed perfectly fine to me, that I was happy to have found such a beautiful place so cheap. They didn't laugh with me. Mrs. Harris put her hand on my arm and said in this very serious voice that if I ever felt uncomfortable, if I ever needed to leave in a hurry, I shouldn't hesitate. I should just go and not worry about the house or my belongings or anything else. The way she said it made me cold all over, made me want to ask what she meant, but before I could, they were walking back to their car, and Mr. Harris called over his shoulder that I should keep my bedroom door locked at night. And then, they were gone. That night the breathing got louder. I lay in bed trying to convince myself it was the wind or the old heating system or any of a dozen rational explanations, but the rhythm was too regular, too deliberate, in through the walls and out through the walls. And I could feel it in the floor. Feel the vibration of something massive drawing air and expelling it. I turned on all the lights and walked through the house, checking every room. And in the hallway, outside the master bedroom, I found something that made my blood turn to ice. The wallpaper was moving, just barely, just a slight ripple like something was crawling underneath it, and when I touched it, the wall was warm, body temperature warm, and I could feel a pulse beating beneath my palm, slow and strong like a heartbeat. I spent the rest of that night in my car in the driveway. When morning came, I went back inside and checked the hallway, and the wallpaper was still. The wall cool and normal, and I started to wonder if I'd had some kind of breakdown, if the stress of the divorce and the move had finally snapped something in my brain. But then I saw the marks on the floor, footprints, small ones, child-sized. They led from the master bedroom down the hall to a door I hadn't opened yet, a door I'd assumed was a closet. The footprints were made of something dark and sticky, and when I knelt down and touched one, it felt like blood but smelled like that damp earth smell that permeated the whole house. I opened the door. Behind it was a staircase going up, narrow wooden stairs that disappeared into darkness. I hadn't known the house had an attic. The real estate listing hadn't mentioned one. I stood there looking up into that darkness with my heart hammering, and I knew I should close the door, should lock it, should leave the house and never come back. But I couldn't because I needed to know what was up there, needed to understand what was happening. I climbed the stairs slowly, using my phone's flashlight to see. and at the top I found a single room that stretched the length of the house with a peaked ceiling and dormer windows that were covered in thick, dark curtains. The room was full of photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, pinned to the walls and hanging from strings stretched across the ceiling like a web. They were all pictures of the same family, a mother, father, and 3 young children, taken over what looked like years, chronicling the kids growing from babies to maybe 10 or 11 years old. The Blackwoods, I realized. This was the family who'd lived here, who'd left so suddenly. I walked through that forest of photographs, my phone light casting strange shadows, and I saw that the later pictures showed the family looking strained, frightened, the smiles forced when they smiled at all. In one of the last photos, dated March 1989, the mother was staring at the camera with an expression of pure terror, and behind her the wall was moving, rippling, exactly like I'd seen the hallway wallpaper move. There was a journal on a small desk in the corner. I opened it and saw entries written in a shaky hand, dated throughout 1988 and early 1989. The first entries were normal, mundane notes about daily life, but they quickly became disturbing. The mother, whose name was Patricia, wrote about hearing breathing in the walls, about feeling like the house was watching them, about her youngest daughter claiming that the house talked to her at night, whispered things through the heating vents. She wrote about finding rooms that shouldn't exist, doors that led to impossible spaces, hallways that were longer on the inside than they should have been based on the house's exterior dimensions. She wrote about her husband becoming obsessed with the house's history, spending all his time in the local library, researching the property, and coming home one day with information that made him lock himself in his study for 3 days. The last entry was dated March 15th, 1989. Patricia wrote that they were leaving tonight, that they couldn't stay any longer, that the house had taken her youngest daughter Emily and kept her for 3 days before giving her back wrong, hollow, something else wearing Emily's face. She wrote that her husband had discovered the truth about the house, that it had been built on top of something old, something that predated the town, some kind of structure or dwelling that the early settlers had found and tried to seal away by building over it. She wrote that the house wasn't haunted, it was alive, actually alive, grown from the thing beneath it like a flower from a root, and it fed on the people who lived in it, slowly absorbing them, replacing them with copies, with empty vessels it could control. I dropped the journal. I ran down the attic stairs and through the house and out the front door, and I was halfway to my car when I realized I could still feel the house, feel its attention on me like weight, like pressure. I turned back and looked at it, and I swear to God the windows looked like eyes, the front door looked like a mouth, and the whole structure seemed to lean toward me hungrily. I got in my car and drove to the local library and found Carol, the real estate agent's number, and called her and demanded to know why she'd sold me a house with that kind of history, and she started crying and said she was sorry. She was so sorry, but the town needed someone to take it, needed someone to occupy it, because when the house was empty it started affecting other buildings, started spreading, and they'd had to condemn 2 houses near it last year because their walls started breathing too. She said the town had been feeding the house for over 100 years, selling it cheap to desperate people who didn't ask enough questions, people who would live there for a few months or years before the house finished with them, before they disappeared or left suddenly like the Blackwoods, and then the town would sell it again to the next victim. She said I could try to leave, could try to walk away, but the house had its hooks in me now, had started the process, and if I didn't go back, it would come get me, would extend itself somehow, would grow new rooms and hallways that led to wherever I ran. She said the only people who escaped were the ones who burned it down, but every time someone tried, the fire wouldn't spread because the house was too wet inside, too organic, and it healed faster than flames could damage it. I hung up on her. I sat in the library parking lot trying to figure out what to do, and that's when I noticed the smell, that damp earth smell. It was in my car. I looked in the back seat and saw something that made me scream. The back seat was covered in that same dark, sticky substance, the blood-earth mixture, and it was spreading, crawling up the seats, and I could see impressions forming in it like invisible hands pressing down, like the house was reaching for me even here, miles away from the property. I drove back. I didn't know what else to do. The house was waiting, looking smug if a house can look smug, and when I walked inside it felt different, felt warmer, felt welcoming in a horrible way, like it was happy I'd returned. That was 6 months ago. I'm still here. I've tried to leave 4 times, and each time the house stops me, locks the doors, grows new hallways that lead back to where I started, makes my car not start, fills my lungs with that damp earth smell until I can't breathe. The house is patient. It's been alive for over a century, and it can wait. It's changing me slowly, day by day, and I can feel it happening. My skin sometimes feels too tight, like it belongs to someone else. I find myself standing in rooms with no memory of walking there. I wake up in different parts of the house than where I fell asleep. The worst part is the children. I see them sometimes, 3 of them, the Blackwood kids, wandering the hallways looking lost and confused. I know they're not real, not anymore, just copies the house made. But they look so sad, so trapped. And I think about Patricia's journal, about Emily coming back wrong. And I wonder if some part of the real children is still in there, still aware, imprisoned inside these hollow things the house created. I'm writing this on my laptop, which still has internet somehow, though my phone stopped working weeks ago, and I'm going to try to post it somewhere, leave some kind of warning for whoever comes after me, because I know now that I won't escape, that the house is going to finish whatever process it started the day I moved in, and soon there will be someone else living here wearing my face, and the town will put the house back on the market, and another desperate person will think they found a miracle, and the cycle will continue. If you're reading this, if you're thinking about buying a house in Harrow's End, or any small town where the prices seem too good to be true, please learn from my mistake. There's always a reason, always something wrong, and some bargains cost everything you have and everything you are. The breathing is very loud now. I can feel the house digesting me, pulling me in, making me part of its structure. Sometimes I touch the walls, and I can feel other people in there, absorbed, trapped, their consciousness spread through the wood and plaster like blood through veins. Soon I'll join them. Soon I'll be the house, and the house will be me, and there won't be any difference anymore. It's almost a relief. I should never have agreed to move back home for the summer, but my mother was sick, and my father couldn't take care of her alone, and I was between jobs anyway, so it seemed like the right thing to do, the decent thing, even though the thought of returning to Mercy Point made my skin crawl with a dread I couldn't fully explain. My name is Alex Reeves, and I grew up in Mercy Point, a coastal town in Maine with a population that hovered around 900. A place where fog rolled in thick every evening, and the smell of salt and fish and decay hung over everything, where tourists came during summer thinking it was quaint, but locals knew better. Locals knew that Mercy Point had traditions that went back centuries, traditions that outsiders weren't supposed to see. The Festival of Lights happened every year on the first weekend of September, right after Labor Day, when the tourists had gone home and the town belonged to itself again. I'd participated in it every year growing up. Walking in the parade with my family, wearing the traditional mask like everyone else, carrying a candle like everyone else, following the procession from the church to the harbor. And I'd never thought much about it, never questioned why we all wore those ceramic masks that covered our entire faces, never wondered why the festival had to happen at night, never asked where the ceremony at the harbor actually led. Children in small towns don't ask those kinds of questions. We just do what we're told, what our parents did, what their parents did, accepting tradition as immutable law. But I'd been gone for 8 years, living in Boston, building a life away from Mercy Point, and distance had given me perspective, had made me realize that a lot of what I'd accepted as normal in my childhood was actually deeply strange. I thought about the Festival of Lights sometimes late at night, thought about those masks and the way they made everyone look identical. Thought about the ceremony at the harbor where everyone would stand at the water's edge and throw their candles into the waves while the town elder spoke words in a language that wasn't English, wasn't any language I recognized. I thought about how after the festival every year there would always be someone missing. How we'd hear that old Mr. Peterson had moved away, or young Sarah Chen had gone to live with relatives out of state, or the Murphy family had decided to relocate for work, and nobody ever questioned these disappearances. Nobody ever called or wrote to these people who left. We just accepted that they were gone and moved on with our lives. I arrived in Mercy Point in early August. My mother's cancer was aggressive and the doctors had given her maybe 6 months, and I could see the disease eating away at her, making her thin and gray. But she smiled when she saw me and held my hand and said she was glad I'd come home, glad I'd be here for the festival. I felt cold when she said that, but I smiled back and said, of course, I wouldn't miss it. My father looked older than I remembered, more worn, and there was something in his eyes that might have been fear or sadness or resignation, like he was carrying a weight he couldn't share. The town felt smaller than I remembered and more claustrophobic, like the buildings had moved closer together, like the fog was thicker, like the ocean had crept nearer to shore. I walked the streets and recognized faces, but many of the people I'd known growing up were gone, replaced by younger families or by nobody at all, empty houses with dark windows. I ran into my childhood friend Marcus at the grocery store, and he looked shocked to see me. Actually stepped back, like I'd startled him, and when I asked how he'd been, he just said, "Fine. Everything's fine." And then he made an excuse and left quickly, glancing back over his shoulder like he was afraid I might follow. I asked my mother about Marcus that evening, and she got very quiet, and then said that Marcus had been chosen 3 years ago, said it like that. Chosen, and when I asked what she meant, she changed the subject and wouldn't answer no matter how many times I pressed. My father left the room entirely. I started paying more attention after that, started noticing things that didn't add up. There were 23 names on a memorial plaque outside the church, people who'd moved away over the past decade, but when I tried to look them up online, I couldn't find any trace of them. No social media, no public records, nothing, like they'd been erased from existence rather than relocated. The masks for the Festival of Lights were kept in the church basement, stored in special cabinets, and you were assigned your mask when you were 7 years old, and you kept the same one for your entire life. I remembered the day I'd received mine, remembered how proud I'd felt, how it had seemed like an important rite of passage. I asked my mother if my mask was still at the church, and she said yes, they'd been saving it. They knew I'd come back. Eventually. Because everyone comes back for the festival. It's tradition. It's obligation. It's the way things have always been done in Mercy Point. I went to the church 2 weeks before the festival. Pastor Hollis was in his office and he looked up when I knocked, and his expression went through surprise and then something darker, something that might have been pity. I told him I was back for the summer and wanted to see my mask, wanted to make sure it still fit, and he hesitated for a long moment and then said, "Of course, follow me." We went down to the basement and he unlocked the cabinet room, and inside were hundreds of masks arranged on shelves, each one labeled with a name. He found mine and handed it to me, and I held it, feeling the weight of it, the smooth, cold ceramic. The masks were beautiful in a disturbing way, white faces with no expressions, just smooth blank surfaces with holes for eyes and mouth, and I realized, looking at the hundreds of them arranged on those shelves, that they were all slightly different, subtly unique, like they'd been molded from actual faces, from actual people. I said this out loud without thinking, and Pastor Hollis's hand clamped down on my shoulder hard enough to hurt. And he said very quietly that I should be careful what I noticed, what I said, that the festival was important to the town's survival, that certain sacrifices had always been necessary, and questioning them now wouldn't help anyone, least of all me. I pulled away from him and left the church, my heart pounding, the mask clutched in my hands, and I knew then that I'd been right to be afraid, that the Festival of Lights wasn't a celebration, but something else, something terrible, that the town had been doing for generations. I went to the library and dug through old records, through newspapers, going back to the town's founding in 1743, and I found references to the festival, to the traditions brought over from the old country, to the covenant made with the sea, to the necessary offerings that kept Mercy Point prosperous while other coastal towns struggled. The first festival had happened in 1744. 20 colonists had gathered at the harbor and performed a ceremony described in old letters as a binding, a pact with something that lived in the deep water. Something that would protect the town's fishing vessels and ensure good harvests in exchange for regular gifts, regular tributes. The letters never specified what these tributes were, but reading between the lines it was obvious. People, actual people, given to the sea every year. Sacrifices wearing those ceramic masks so that nobody could see their faces, so that nobody could recognize them, so that the town could maintain the fiction that they'd simply moved away. I confronted my parents that night. I told them what I'd learned, what I'd figured out, and my mother started crying, and my father just looked at me with immense sadness and said, I was right, said the festival was a lottery, said everyone in town over the age of 18 was eligible, and the chosen person was notified privately a week before the ceremony, and they had two choices. Participate willingly, and their family would be compensated, would be protected, or refuse and be taken anyway, and their family would be marked, would likely be chosen next year or the year after. He said the masks existed so that nobody knew who was being sacrificed except the person themselves, so that the town could maintain its denial, could pretend that everything was normal even as they walked someone to their death. I asked if he or my mother had ever been chosen, and he said no, they'd been lucky, but they'd walked in the procession dozens of times knowing that someone in the line was walking to their death, someone wearing a mask just like theirs. And they'd done nothing, said nothing, because that's what you do in Mercy Point. That's how the town survives. I asked what my mother meant when she said I'd be here for the festival, and she said through her tears that she'd received the notification, that she'd been chosen, that her mask would be marked with a special symbol that only the elder could see, and she'd accepted it because she was dying anyway, because at least this way her death would mean something, would fulfill the covenant for another year. I said no, absolutely not. We were leaving tonight, all three of us, and my father shook his head and said we couldn't, said if someone chosen tried to leave the town, the thing in the water would know, would come for them and everyone they loved. That there were stories of families who'd tried to run and were found days later washed up on the beach, drowned, but not by water. Their lungs filled with something thick and black and wrong. He said the only escape was to never come back to Mercy Point once you left, to stay away forever, and I'd made the mistake of returning, had put myself back in the lottery, had made myself eligible again. The festival was on Saturday. On Wednesday, my mother showed me her mask, and there was indeed a mark on it, a small symbol painted on the inside where nobody could see it when she wore it, a spiral that looked like it was moving even though it was just paint. She said she was at peace with it, that she'd made her choice, that I should stop fighting and just let things happen the way they were meant to happen. I said I couldn't do that, couldn't just walk in a parade while my mother went to her death, and she said I wouldn't know it was her. That's the point of the masks, that I'd be walking along with hundreds of other people, and I wouldn't know which one was her until the ceremony was over, and she didn't come home. I decided to switch masks. It was the only plan I could think of. On Friday night, while my parents slept, I took my mother's marked mask and put it with my things, and I put my unmarked mask where hers had been. In the morning, she didn't notice the difference. The masks all looked identical unless you checked for the interior mark, and she had no reason to check. She'd already accepted her fate. I felt terrible for the deception, but I couldn't let her die. Not like this. Not for some ancient covenant with something in the ocean. Saturday arrived. The fog was heavier than usual, turning the world into a gray, wet blur where you could barely see 10 feet in any direction. The entire town gathered at the church in the late afternoon, and we all put on our masks and picked up our candles and formed into a line, and I couldn't tell who anyone was, couldn't pick out my parents in the crowd of identical white faces, couldn't hear individual voices because everyone was silent. On the only sound, the shuffling of feet and the distant crash of waves. We started walking, hundreds of us, a slow procession through the fog-shrouded streets, and I felt the weight of the marked mask on my face. Felt the spiral symbol like a brand against my forehead even though I couldn't see it. We reached the harbor and arranged ourselves along the stone wall that separated the town from the sea. The water was rough, black waves crashing against the wall and spraying us with cold salt water. Pastor Hollis stood at the center, wearing a special mask that was gold instead of white, and he began to chant in that strange language, his voice rising and falling in a rhythm that felt old, felt wrong, felt like it was pulling something up from the deep places. Everyone held their candles up, and the flames flickered in the wind and cast dancing shadows through the fog. Then I felt it, a pull, a compulsion. My body started moving without my permission, walking forward toward the wall, and I realized the marked mask was controlling me, was directing me, and I tried to stop, but my muscles wouldn't respond. They just kept moving me forward step by step toward the water. I could hear my mother screaming somewhere in the crowd, could hear her calling my name, but I couldn't turn to look at her, couldn't do anything except walk toward the edge. I reached the wall. Below me the water churned, and I could see something massive moving beneath the surface, something that made the waves move in patterns that violated physics, that made the water look thick and oily. Pastor Hollis's chanting reached a crescendo, and he pointed at me and said words that might have been, "We give this offering freely." And I felt my body prepare to jump. But then there were hands on my shoulders pulling me back, and my father's voice in my ear saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." And he ripped the mask off my face and put it on his own, and before I could react, he jumped, vaulted over the wall, and disappeared into the black water below. I screamed and lunged for him, but other hands held me back, and through my tears I saw the water where he'd entered start to glow with a pale green light. And then the light sank deeper and disappeared, and the water calmed, and the massive thing beneath the surface withdrew into the depths. The ceremony ended. Everyone filed away silently, removing their masks as they went, returning to their normal faces and their normal lives. My mother found me, and we held each other and sobbed, and nobody stopped to comfort us. Nobody said anything. They just walked past like we were invisible, because that's the rule. The unspoken rule that lets Mercy Point function. You don't acknowledge the sacrifice. You don't speak about it. You pretend it never happened. We buried an empty coffin for my father. The town chipped in for a nice headstone. Everyone said how sorry they were for our loss, said he'd been a good man, said he'd moved away to a better place. The lies were smooth, practiced, easy. My mother died 3 months later. I buried her next to the empty coffin, and then I left Mercy Point, and I've never gone back. I got letters from Pastor Hollis for a while, reminders that the festival happens every September. Reminders that I'm still a resident in the town's eyes, still eligible for the lottery. Reminders that if I don't return voluntarily, I might be collected involuntarily. I've moved 4 times trying to avoid the letters, but they always find me, and sometimes I wake up at night and I can smell salt water, and I know that eventually the thing in the water will come for me, will drag me back to Mercy Point, whether I want to go or not, because the covenant is eternal and nobody escapes it forever. If you're reading this and you're thinking about visiting Maine, about exploring the charming coastal towns, please stay away from Mercy Point. Don't go there no matter how picturesque it looks, no matter how friendly the people seem. That town survives on blood and lies, and it's been doing it for almost 300 years, and it will continue doing it for 300 more, feeding its god one life at a time, one masked sacrifice each September when the tourists have gone and the town can practice its horrible tradition in private. The Festival of Lights isn't a celebration, it's murder, and everyone there is complicit. And if you stay too long, you'll become complicit too, because that's what Mercy Point does. It makes you part of the lie until you can't tell where the lie ends, and you begin. There's a stretch of highway outside of Copper Ridge, Montana, that doesn't appear on any map, and I know this because I've looked at every map I can find, digital and paper, satellite and street view, and that particular 12-mile section simply doesn't exist according to the rest of the world, even though I drove it for 3 days straight before I finally escaped. My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm a long-haul truck driver, 31 years old, and I've been driving cross-country routes since I was 23. So I know roads, I know highways, I know the geography of this country better than most people, and I'm telling you that there's a stretch of road that traps people, that loops them through the same 12 miles over and over until they die of thirst or starvation, or until they go insane and drive off the road into the forests that line both sides, forests that are wrong in ways I still have nightmares about. I was driving from Seattle to Billings in late November, taking Route 90 like I'd done 100 times before, and I decided to take a shortcut when I saw a sign for Route 47, a smaller highway that my GPS said would save me about 40 minutes. The turnoff was easy to miss, just a narrow exit with a faded sign, and the road itself was old asphalt patched in places with gravel, 2 lanes with no shoulder, cutting through thick pine forest that blocked out most of the daylight even though it was only mid-afternoon. I didn't see any other cars, didn't pass any buildings or houses or even utility poles, just trees and road and more trees. And after about 20 minutes I started to feel uneasy, started to think maybe this shortcut wasn't worth it, started looking for a place to turn around. That's when I passed the burned-out gas station. It was on the right side of the road, just a collapsed shell of a building with blackened walls and a rusted Texaco sign hanging at an angle. And I remember thinking it looked like it had been abandoned for decades, like maybe this road had been busier once but wasn't anymore. I drove for another mile and decided I'd definitely turn around at the next opportunity, and that's when I passed the burned-out gas station again. Same building, same side of the road, same Texaco sign. I'd been driving in a straight line for over a mile. There was no way I could have circled back to the same location. I pulled over and checked my GPS. It showed me on Route 47, heading east, making normal progress, but something felt wrong, felt impossible. I got out of my truck and looked around, and the forest was too quiet. No birds, no wind, no insects, just complete silence except for the idling of my engine. The trees all looked identical, perfectly straight trunks with branches that started too high up. And when I looked closely, I realized there was no undergrowth, no bushes or grass or fallen leaves. just bare dirt between the trees like something had sterilized the ground. I got back in my truck and kept driving, telling myself I was being paranoid, that I'd somehow gotten turned around without realizing it, that there was a logical explanation. 10 minutes later, I passed the burned-out gas station for the third time. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I stopped the truck again, and this time I got out and walked to the gas station, thinking maybe if I examined it up close, I'd find evidence of how I kept encountering it. Maybe there were multiple stations that looked similar. Maybe my memory was playing tricks on me. The inside of the gas station was gutted, just charred walls and a collapsed ceiling and the smell of old smoke. But on the counter, partially buried in debris, I found a trucker's logbook. I pulled it out and opened it, and saw entries dated October 2007, written in increasingly frantic handwriting. The trucker's name was Michael Reeves, and he wrote about getting stuck on Route 47, about passing the same landmarks over and over, about driving for days without finding an exit or seeing another person. The last entry was dated October 19th, 2007, and it just said, "The trees are moving closer. I think they're hungry. I'm going to try driving into them. Maybe the forest has an end even if the road doesn't." I dropped the logbook and ran back to my truck, and as I ran I could feel the forest watching me, could sense attention from between those uniform trees, like something lived in there and was observing me with interest. I got in my truck, locked the doors even though that seemed stupid, and I drove faster, pushing my speed up to 60 even though the narrow road made that dangerous. I was looking for anything different, any variation in the landscape, any sign that I was making actual progress. I passed a road sign that said Copper Ridge 35 miles. Then 10 minutes later I passed the same sign, same dents in the metal, same bird droppings on the post, then the burned out gas station again. I'd completed the loop. 12 miles of road that circled back on itself somehow, impossibly, defying geography and physics. I tried turning around, driving backward, but after 12 miles in reverse, I ended up at the same starting point, the same exit that had led me onto Route 47, except now when I tried to take it, the road simply continued straight. The exit had disappeared, like the highway was refusing to let me leave. I tried driving off-road, steering my truck toward the forest, but the ground at the tree line was too soft. My wheels sank immediately into what looked like solid dirt, but felt like mud, and when I backed up and got out to investigate, I saw that the mud was moving, pulsing, like it was alive. I realized I was trapped, truly trapped on a road that looped endlessly, with forests on either side that were somehow alive and hostile, with no exit and no way to call for help because my phone had no signal, and my CB radio picked up nothing but static. I got back in my truck and tried to think rationally about my situation. I had food and water for maybe 3 days if I rationed carefully. My fuel tank was 3/4 full, which meant I could drive for probably 5 or 6 hours before I'd need to stop and conserve gas. I needed a plan. I needed to figure out the rules of this place, needed to find the weakness in whatever was keeping me here. I drove the loop again, slowly this time, paying attention to every detail. The burned-out gas station always appeared at the 7-mile mark. At the 3-mile mark, there was a dead tree that had fallen across the road, but the road passed through it somehow, like the tree was a hologram. At the 9-mile mark, the pavement changed color slightly, becoming darker for about 100 yards. These were the only variations I could detect. Everything else was identical forest, identical road, identical gray sky overhead. When I passed the gas station on my 4th loop, I saw something new. A car parked behind the building, a sedan that looked modern, maybe only a few years old. I stopped and got out and approached it carefully. The car was empty, but the engine was still warm. Someone else was here. Someone else had gotten trapped recently. I called out, shouting hello, asking if anyone could hear me. But the forest swallowed my voice, made it sound flat and dead. I found the driver 10 minutes later. She was sitting against a tree about 50 yards into the forest, a woman maybe 40 years old wearing business clothes, and she was crying silently, tears running down her face but no sound coming from her mouth. I ran to her and asked if she was okay, what happened, how long had she been here, and she looked at me with eyes that were wrong, eyes that were too wide, pupils too dilated. And she opened her mouth and insects poured out, dozens of small beetles or roaches spilling over her lips and down her chin, and she kept trying to speak, but only more insects came out, and I stumbled backward in horror, and she stood up and started walking toward me, with jerky movements like a puppet, and I ran back to my truck and drove away as fast as I could. That was the end of day 1. I drove through the night, too afraid to sleep, passing the same landmarks over and over in the darkness, my headlights illuminating 12 miles of road on infinite repeat. I saw other things during those night hours. Figures standing at the tree line, human-shaped but wrong proportions, too tall or too thin or with too many limbs. I saw animals that didn't exist, things that were part deer and part something else, with antlers that branched in impossible ways. I saw the woman from the forest standing in the middle of the road, and I swerved around her, and in my mirror I watched her turn and follow my truck with her gaze, insects still crawling from her mouth. Day 2. I tried ramming through the tree line at full speed, thinking maybe momentum would carry me through whatever barrier was keeping me on the road. My truck hit the trees and stopped instantly, like I'd hit a concrete wall, and the impact deployed my airbag and cracked my windshield. The trees didn't move, didn't show any damage. I was stunned for several minutes, and when I finally got out to assess the situation, I saw that my front bumper was undamaged too, like the collision had been absorbed by something invisible between me and the forest. I was running low on food. I'd been rationing, but I'd eaten more than I planned due to stress and fear. My water was still okay, but I knew by day 4 I'd be in trouble. I tried to think of other solutions. Could I wait for someone to come looking for me? My dispatcher knew my route, knew I should have arrived in Billings yesterday, but if Route 47 didn't appear on maps, if it existed in some pocket dimension or alternate reality, would search parties even be able to find it? Would they drive right past the exit without seeing it? That afternoon, I passed the gas station and saw that Michael Reeves's logbook was back on the counter, closed, exactly where I'd found it originally. I hadn't returned it to that spot. I dropped it on the floor when I ran away. The loop was resetting somehow, returning things to their starting positions, and I realized with growing horror that maybe I was resetting too. Maybe each loop was wearing me down, erasing me bit by bit until I'd be like the woman in the forest, like Michael Reeves, like all the others who'd gotten trapped here over the years, just empty husks that the road kept as decorations. On day 3, I stopped trying to escape and started trying to understand. I studied the loop, looked for patterns, looked for meaning in the variations I'd noticed. The dead tree at mile 3, the dark pavement at mile 9, the gas station at mile 7. 3, 7, 9. Numbers. I tried to find significance in them, tried combinations, tried driving those speeds, tried stopping at those mile markers for those numbers of minutes. Nothing worked. The loop continued. I was out of food, nearly out of water. My fuel gauge was showing empty, but somehow the truck kept running, like the loop was sustaining it, keeping it operational so I could continue driving forever. I was starting to hallucinate from dehydration, seeing things that weren't there. Or maybe they were there, and I was just now seeing them properly. The trees moving when I wasn't looking directly at them, the road breathing beneath my tires, the sky lowering, gradually like it was pressing down. That's when I saw the girl. She was maybe 8 years old, standing on the side of the road at the 2-mile mark, wearing a yellow raincoat even though it wasn't raining. She looked real, solid, not like the shadow figures I'd been seeing. I stopped the truck, and she walked over to my window and I rolled it down, and she said in a perfectly normal child's voice, "You have to pay the toll." I asked what toll, what did she mean, and she said, "Route 47 requires a toll from everyone who uses it, and most people pay without realizing it, pay with time or memories or small pieces of their future. But some people resist, and those people get stuck, get trapped in the loop until they agree to pay, or until the road takes payment by force." I asked how I could pay, what did the road want from me, and she smiled and said, "The road wants different things from different people. For me, it wants a memory, the happiest memory I have, the one I treasure most, and if I give it up willingly, I can leave. But the memory will be gone forever. I'll never be able to recall it. It'll be erased from my mind completely." I thought about my happiest memory. It was the day I got married 7 years ago, standing on a beach in California with my wife Sarah, feeling the sun and the wind and knowing I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That memory had sustained me through hard times, had reminded me why life was worth living. The road wanted to take that from me. I said no. I said I'd rather die here than give up that memory. The girl's smile didn't change, but her eyes went black, completely black. No whites at all, and she said that's fine. Most people make that choice eventually, and the road is patient. The road always gets its payment one way or another, and then she walked into the forest and disappeared between the trees. I kept driving. I'd made my choice. I'd loop forever if I had to, but I wouldn't give up the best part of my life, Wouldn't let this horrible road steal the memory of Sarah in her white dress, the ocean behind her, her smile that made everything else irrelevant. But on the next loop, something changed. I passed the gas station and saw that Michael Reeves's logbook was open, and there was a new entry in it, written in my handwriting, dated today, and it said, "I don't remember why I'm driving, I don't remember where I'm going, I can't recall my name or my life or anything before this road. All I know is I have to keep driving, have to complete the loop, have to pass the gas station and the dead tree and the dark pavement. That's all there is. That's all there's ever been." I realized the road was taking my memories anyway, taking them slowly with each loop, wearing me down, erasing me whether I consented or not. Panic set in. I had to escape now, immediately, before I forgot everything, before I became like the woman in the forest or Michael Reeves or all the others. I drove to the 2-mile mark where I'd seen the girl, and I pulled over, and I got out, and I shouted into the forest that I agreed. I'd pay the toll, I'd give up the memory, just let me leave, please, let me go. The girl appeared again, walking out from between the trees, and she held out her small hand and said all I had to do was take it, hold it for 10 seconds, and the payment would be complete. I took her hand. It was cold, ice cold, and I felt something flow out of me, felt it being pulled through my arm and into her, and I tried to hold on to the memory, tried to picture Sarah in her white dress, tried to remember the beach and the sun and the feeling of joy, but it was slipping away, fading like a dream upon waking, and then it was gone completely. There was just a blank space where that memory used to be, a hole in my mind that I could sense but couldn't fill. The girl let go of my hand and said I could leave now, and I got in my truck and drove, and at the 12-mile mark the exit appeared, the original turnoff I'd taken to get onto Route 47, and I took it and merged onto Route 90. And suddenly there was traffic again, other cars, civilization, and I pulled into a rest stop and sat in my truck shaking, trying to process what had happened. I can't remember my wedding. I know I was married, I'm wearing a ring, I have photos on my phone, but when I look at them, I don't remember the day, don't remember the emotions, don't remember anything about it. There's just blank space, empty space, a missing piece of my life that the road took as payment. Sarah divorced me 6 months later. She said I'd changed, said I was distant and cold, said it was like I didn't love her anymore. And I wanted to explain that I did love her. I did. But I couldn't remember why. Couldn't remember the foundation of our relationship. Couldn't access the core memory that had defined us. I don't drive Route 90 anymore. I don't drive through Montana at all. I take longer routes, inefficient routes, routes that cost me time and money because I'm terrified of seeing that exit again, of ending up back on Route 47. But sometimes late at night I dream about that road, about the loop, about the burned-out gas station and the dead tree, and the girl in the yellow raincoat. And I wake up not remembering where I am or who I am. And it takes minutes for my identity to come back, and I wonder if the road is still taking from me, still erasing me bit by bit, even though I paid the toll and escaped. If you're ever driving through Montana and you see an exit for Route 47, don't take it. I don't care if your GPS says it'll save you time. I don't care how convenient it seems. Just drive past and don't look back, because that road is hungry and it's patient, and once it has you, even if you escape, it never really lets you go. I'm proof of that. I'm missing pieces, missing memories, missing parts of myself that I gave up or that were taken. And I know I'm not whole anymore. I know that road has left permanent marks on me. And sometimes I think maybe I should go back, should find that exit again and pay another toll. Maybe give up more memories until there's nothing left of me to hurt, nothing left to regret, just an empty driver completing an endless loop through a forest that shouldn't exist on a road that no map shows. That might be easier than remembering just enough to know what I've lost. And those were 5 small-town sheriff horror stories. Proof that in places where one badge holds all the power, secrets don't stay buried. They're protected. If these stories made you uneasy, subscribe to Dark Hours for more true horror, disturbing encounters, and real stories that surface when the sun goes down. And let me know in the comments, which story disturbed you the most? Until next time, trust your instincts, watch the road signs. And remember, in some towns, the sheriff isn't there to save you.